Hi, my name is Christopher Malcolm. I'm a writer-director and director-DP based in Los Angeles. I also write a column for F-Stoppers, and this little review of the Nikon ZR is meant to go along with the piece that I'll publish this week in F-Stopper. So last we spoke, I had just announced the arrival of the Nikon ZR, and lo and behold, last week, I got mine. All right, so here's my Nikon ZR. I want to tell you a little bit about why I got this camera, and just straight off the bat, some things that I love about it, some things that I'm already sure are going to drive me a little crazy, but why why in the end this is really a net positive for me as a camera, and why I think it'll be a great tool for a lot of people. So I'm primarily a filmmaker these days, but I've also had a successful career as a commercial photographer. A lot of my campaigns, I'll end up doing both. I'll do a commercial, I'll end up doing stills, video, the whole shebang. In terms of cameras, I've been a Nikonian for a very long time. I currently have the Nikon Z9. That's my primary still camera and my primary hybrid camera. I also have a red Komodo. I shoot with Alexas, Venices, the whole thing. And really the primary reason why I got super excited about this camera in the first place was kind of obvious, which is it is super duper small. It is a small footprint. And this is exactly what I was looking for. I mentioned the other day to a friend of mine, it's like I am past the point in my career where I feel the need to have a super big rig to prove my abilities. So in this case, I just want something small, portable that I can use. Now, it's important to point out that I'm not planning on replacing my existing cameras with this. This is just an add-on. And I'll tell you some of the reasons why. So let's start with the good stuff first. Here are the 3 things I love about the Nikon ZR. It's got 32-bit float audio built in. Now, I know that's maybe a little strange to be thinking, okay, why are we starting a review about a camera by talking about audio? But, well, first things first, the success of your video project is 95% dependent on audio. Don't believe me? Try to make a movie with bad audio, you're not going to get very far. Now, generally, when I'm recording audio, what I'll be doing is I will be recording audio separately from my image. So I'll have the camera set up, and then I'll usually have like a Zoom F6 is what I use, which records 32-bit float audio separately. And then what I have to do is then sync that up in post, and Bob's your uncle, everything's fantastic, right? What the ZR allows you to do is it allows you to have that 32-bit float audio built in. So essentially what happens is if I run whatever mic I run into this camera, it can record in 32-bit float audio, or like in this case, right now, actually inside of here is the Lark Max 2, which is also 32-bit float audio. So I can record to a lavalier or to a boom or whatever on a 32-bit float audio device, wirelessly transmit it right here into my ZR in 32-bit float audio, and I have 32-bit float audio all across the chain without having to bring along my field recorder. So if I don't feel like pulling out the Zoom F6, if I just want to just have a really quick setup for do something like this, I can do that, keeping it all in 32-bit float audio right in here. I don't have to worry about syncing up time code after the fact. I don't have to worry about syncing up claps. It's just record straight into the camera. So oddly enough, the thing I love most about this camera, this video camera, is the audio. Second most important thing is probably the headline reason why most of you probably picked up this camera, which is the R3D files. So this can record in red code raw. So if you're used to shooting with a Komodo, a Raptor, any of the red cameras, you'll know that R3D is a great format to work with. It's widely accepted throughout the industry, so you're not going to have any problems taking it to a colorist or taking it through any part of your workflow during post. Everybody's very used to R3D files, which isn't necessarily the case with NRAW files, which I also love, but R3D is just a universally accepted format. It also has a lot of great ability, so if you're planning on doing something really interesting in post, this is a really good format to be able to do that on. And again, now this is just built right into this camera. So as I said, I actually have a red Komodo, so this isn't necessarily replacing that. But what's great about this is that now when I'm shooting with my red in R3D, I can shoot alongside of it in R3D, and I can have a file format that matches, which just makes my post-production workflow so much easier. Now, it's important to note that the R3D in this camera is not the same as the R3D in the other cameras. So this is actually R3D NE, which I don't know if that's Nikon edition. I don't know what the NE stands for, but it's slightly different. But if I took, did a couple tests. I took these straight into Resolve, and it's basically it operates exactly the same way as a normal R3D file would work. It just has it's just slightly different. One thing that is different is that these files are 12-bit color as opposed to 16-bit color. You're getting like a Komodo. Again, not something you're probably going to notice unless you're really, really looking for it. But it is something to consider if that's something that's important to you. The third thing I love about this camera is, I was going to say little, but it's not little, is this huge viewfinder, or this huge LCD screen. So, if you're like me, and again, you want to keep things super small, I absolutely hate, and I mean hate, having to mount external monitors on top of my cameras. It's just, it's fine. It just annoys me to no end to have to do that, because it almost throws off the balance of my rig. So what's great about this is a 4-inch LCD monitor. I mean, if you think about like a Atomos Ninja or something like that, those are small, but those are still 5 inches. 4 inches, not a big deal. In terms of difference, and this one is just built right into the camera. So now right off the bat, just like the 32-bit float, I now get to leave both my field recorder and my monitor at home, just travel with this. Super light. And you're gonna hear me say the word light and small quite a bit in this review, because I think that's really where this fits into my workflow. Again, I said I'm not ditching my other cameras. This camera, however, will be pretty much like an everyday camera, so if I'm doing like a stand-up like this, I need to talk to YouTube. If I want to do a quick interview, if I'm shooting small, like say I'm shooting a narrative piece in a place that I'm not supposed to be in, this is a really small footprint, very easy to get in and out of. I feel like this camera, even though it's got some, gripes, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, the net total of it means that I think I'm going to be probably using this camera for most everything video. Unless, again, I'm on like a client job and I need to bring in the big guns. That's a different story altogether. But especially any kind of like run and gun stuff, indie films, short films, anything like that, this is more than capable of doing the trick. And again, with R3D files in 32-bit float audio already married to the thing with a very small footprint. So now let's talk about a couple of things I don't love about this camera. So one of them you'll see right here actually two of them are on the bottom. So one is that we've only got one mounting point right here. And why that's important is if you're putting this thing on like a tripod or like a gimbal, that one mounting point, it tends to rotate, like it'll change, right? Which can be a pain in the neck. So again, if this is really a cinema camera, what you really want are at least two mounting points here, so that it doesn't twist, so it prevents things from twisting. This does have a locator pin, but it's off to the side for some reason. Like for photography, that would be great. But for video, having it off to the side doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The other thing that I don't love is that the battery and card are both on the bottom, which again, as I'm hand holding it here now, that it doesn't really make much of a difference. But if I were to have this rigged out, or if I had this on a tripod, like I did a couple tests the other day, and I realized basically every time you need to change the battery, I'm having to take it off of a tripod, take it off of a gimbal, just so I can access this door, because otherwise this door gets, doesn't open all the way. So that's super annoying, especially if you're going to have to change your card a lot. Speaking of changing your card a lot, you probably will, because the files are pretty massive. So this is the drawback to recording raw video. So those R3D files are fantastic, but they're big. So like I have a 1 terabyte card in here, which gives me about an hour and a half of recording time here. And raw, interestingly enough, I wanted to just kind of do a little test to see if it was possible to decrease that time by using a different format. But NRAW is also about an hour and a half on this card. ProRes RAW is also about an hour and a half on the card. Interestingly enough, ProRes 422, even though it's not a RAW format, it's actually takes up even more space. It's actually only like an hour and 20 on this. You can record in like the H.264 or H.265 formats, which are 8-bit or actually the H.265 is 10-bit. But you can record in either of those formats, and you'll get about 2 hours on the card. But you're going to want to run RAW in this. There is a note between the types of RAW files. They're pretty equivalent, but between RAW and H.264.26, I mean, there's a pretty massive difference. So this camera, if you're getting this, just keep in mind that you're going to be shooting RAW. You're going to be using up a lot of data. Depending on your workflow, that may or may not make sense. Again, for me, I'm shooting like narrative scenes, so it's fine. But again, if you're planning on setting up the camera and letting it run for a couple hours at a time, you're going to be chewing through a lot of data. So keep that in mind. I do like these little 3 knobs on the top. You've got like this cute little display mode, and then it's exposure exposure compensation, but I've actually got that mapped to ISO already. It's kind of similar. I don't know if you've ever used like the Blackmagic pocket cinema cameras. This is very similar in that way, that it's quite convenient to be able to just right up top change your settings. One thing I don't super love is that, so if you're a Nikon shooter, usually, you have like the I button, and then you have the menu button. So the menu button takes you to the main menu. The I button takes you to the more abbreviated touch screen, menu. On this, there's only the one menu button. And with that menu button, which is right here, there's only one menu button. And with that menu button, it takes you straight to the I menu. But to get to the main menu, then you have to hit another button. You have to hit something on that screen to take you to the main menu. Not the end of the world. Just means that I have to get my head around the fact that getting to the main menu is really like a 2-step process. You'll notice that there is a photo video switch on the top here. So this camera has basically the same sensor that is in the Z6 III, which means a lot of things. It means amazing autofocus. 3 sensor is fantastic image quality. So it's got all that going for you. And in theory, you can use this as a photo camera because it's got the same capabilities in terms of specs as a Z6 III. With that said, I don't think I would ever really use this as a photo camera. Maybe if I was on vacation and I just wanted to take, a couple shots here or there. But, for me, maybe because I'm old, but to me, like a camera is not a still camera unless you have an EVF. And as you can see, this does not have an EVF. Also, just the layout of the buttons isn't quite conducive to that. So like if you're like a back button autofocus shooter like myself, these buttons are really not set up for that. So again, if you're using this as a still camera, I don't think this is really the still camera for you, which actually brings up an interesting point, which is when I was taking, when I've really kind of been putting this through the paces, I noticed that there's actually more similarities between this and the Z6 III than I was expecting. Not only is the sensor is obviously the same between these two. I mean, really the main differences are the things I mentioned up at the top, which is you've got red code RAW in here, you've got 32-bit float audio in here, and you've got this super big LCD screen. But other than that, the cameras between this and the Z6 III are pretty similar cameras. The difference between that is that the Z6 III actually has a massive advantage in that it has a full-size HDMI port, whereas this has the dreaded micro HDMI port. That is like the worst, which is fine. Again, for this type of camera, since you're not likely to build it up, that's not as big of a deal. But again, if you really want to use this in a serious cinema workflow, you're going to want to be able to, hook this up to a transmitter and send it to one of your colleagues or somebody else on the set. And that micro HDMI port is a problem. Whereas, let's say the Z6 III has a full-size HDMI port. So if that's important to you, and more important than, say, red code RAW or 32-bit float, that could be something that you could really, you should really think about. Because they're essentially similar cameras. It's just a matter of the codec. It's really what it's just the codec and a 32-bit float and the larger LCD screen is what you're talking about. And so again, if you're a hybrid shooter, let's say you're like 50-50 between stills and motion, I actually probably would go for a Z6 III because again, that has the built-in EVF, so you can really, shoot with it, and the full-size HDMI. So in that particular case, I might actually go for the Z6 III. If you're really more like fully in video, 90% video, and you just maybe take a couple thumbnails, this is the move to go to. One thing I do love is right on the top, they have this little jogger wheel, this little jogger switch, which if you guys have seen any of the Nikon power zoom lenses, the PZ lenses, which, you can kind of go zzz, and you kind of zoom in and out. This is really kind of made for that. But the cool thing is that if you're using like a manual focus lens, right, which you're probably going to be using a lot of cinema lenses with this body, if you're using a manual focus lens, that defaults then to kind of zoom in and zoom out, or not zoom in and zoom out, but punch in and punch out. So if you're trying to get critical focus on something and you go bloop, real quick, it just takes you straight to your focus point. So it's very quick to be able to get manual focus with this camera, which is very important for a cinema body. Also, as a side note, this camera obviously has the Z mount, which is the most adaptable mount on the market. So no matter what lens system you're in right now, you can probably adapt it to this camera, which is, again, huge for cinema work because, you're going to be choosing your lenses based on your project. So in that format, it's really helpful to be able to have this huge mount that can basically accept everything from PL to Z to E to you name it. It can fit on this camera. I like the Nikon's finally got themselves a smart hot shoe. This is something I've been jealous about as a Nikon person. I've been jealous about this with other brands for years. They finally have this smart hot shoe. There's actually the MED10 shotgun mic that you can connect to that and therefore have audio directly into the camera without having to use the mic jack, which is really great for a cordless setup, which is what I would love to have. One thing, speaking of cords, that is somewhat annoying is that, because all of the outlets are over here on this side of the camera, and then your LCD comes out to that side of the camera. Once you've got like headphones and all stuff plugged into the camera, you can't fully rotate your LCD because it's going to be blocked by the cords. Or, of course, if you're filming yourself, you're going to see the cords right in the middle of your picture. So that's kind of annoying. I don't really know how to get around that, though, because it is, I don't know how you would get around that. I think that just kind of is what it is. Oh, yeah. One other little gripe that I'd love to see Nikon address is the menu system. So again, I've been shooting Nikon forever. I can adjust the Nikon menu in the dark. Like I know where everything is. And as they've added more video features throughout the years, that has gotten, the menu's gotten more and more dense. There's more things on the end, which are kind of video. So basically, if you look at it, that's like A through G or whatever, and then everything is photo up until G. Then G is usually like all the video stuff, which makes perfect sense in a camera like the Z9 or the ZR, or the ZF or something like that. But in the ZR, where it's a video force camera, the menu feels a little weird. Again, because this is a video camera, you would expect to have those things, that video stuff, prioritized right up front. So when I go to the menu, I should go straight to video stuff. The still stuff, you can just bury that back in the menu. Because as I said, this camera is not one that you're going to be really using for stills. You might, but you're using this for video. So with that said, I would love for them to redesign and have like a cinema menu. Kind of like Canon has two different menus, but like a Nikon cinema menu that really just puts the video stuff you need right up top. Another thing that this camera is going to need to eventually get, hopefully via firmware, I think they could do that via firmware, is if it could get anamorphic support. So right now there's no anamorphic D-squeeze in camera, which again means that if I did want to use this with anamorphic, I need to put a monitor on it. And that defeats the whole small size benefit that I was getting before. As I said, one really cool thing that I do like, which is, kind of for those Nikon shooters out there. So I have the Z9, and with the Z9, you can have wireless time code via the Ultra Sync Blue. So I have like two Z9s, and then I have two Z9s. I have my Zoom F6 field recorder. I also have a Zoom F2 field recorder. All those things are all connected via the same time code because of that. It's all completely wirelessly. The time code is all synced between all of those with one device. And now that I add the ZR, I can actually sync it with that too. So now I got 5 things all synced with the same device. And actually I have an Ultra Sync 1 that connects to my Ultra Sync Blue for the red camera. So I actually now have 6 things that all sync wirelessly with time code. So I would actually love it if the ZR were to have a dedicated time code port. But even though it doesn't, it's still, the time code solution really works, and there's not a lot of cords. There's actually less cords. So I'm all for it. all in all, I'm really happy with this purchase. I think that, again, even though it's got a couple little niggles here and there that I've mentioned, I think I can see that this will be the camera I'm pretty much going to pick up 90% of the time, especially when I'm doing stuff. As I said, like if I'm on set and I need to, rent a Venice or something like that, that's a whole different story altogether. But if I'm talking about just, around the house, I need to shoot something. I need to shoot a quick video. I need to do a quick interview. I'm shooting a small indie project. I don't have budget to be bringing in, spending half my budget on gear. This can do so much. And again, I keep going back to it, but now I get to leave the monitor at home. I get to leave the field recorder at home. I get to just carry this puppy, and it's especially combined with this Max, with the Lark Max system, which again feeds 32-bit float all the way in. There's just so much I can do with just this little thing. And it's super duper fast. I don't know if you saw earlier, but when you hit that button, the power button, that thing turns on in 2 seconds. If you're a red shooter, you used to turn on your camera, you go get lunch, you come back, and maybe it might be on eventually. You turn this thing on, it is just ready to rock. I think these days where I'm really all about trying to get the smallest kit possible, just focus on the story, focus on the performance, and focus on lighting, focus on those details. And then I just want a camera that just kind of gets out of my way. And I think this is going to be the perfect tool for me in that sense. And I see getting a lot of use out of it. Now, as I said, I will be shooting an actual project with this coming up in about 3 weeks. Or this will be the B cam. It'll be partly this, it'll be partly the Komodo. But once I do that, I may come back again and tell you more, give you more of an update on how it was actually on set. Everything I've told you so far is just me putzing around and trying to do actual side-by-side tests between the codecs and figuring out what that's all about. But I'll actually come back and give you a say, did it actually explode on set, or did it actually make it through the day? Give it those type of things. But for right now, this is just my initial kind of hands-on review, so I guess I can actually see the camera and get a sense of it. And yeah, hopefully that was helpful.